How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud Gimel, Daf 13 of Masechta Shevuos. Friends, this is going to be a big old daf. The reason why it's going to be a big daf is because, first of all, we have about, I'd say, a third of Yud Beis Amud Beis to do, and I would like to finish the Perek, which is about 2/3 of the way down Yud Daled Amud Aleph. So I guess we're looking at like a daf and a half over here. I would like to do. That's what I would like to do. That way tomorrow we could start with the new parak. Also, like, it's just, there isn't like a good stopping point. It's just kind of like continues really to the end of the parak. So I would like, so we got like, so we're starting like 1/3 from the bottom of Yud Beis Amud Beis, because that, once we start there, it doesn't really stop until Yud Gimel Amud Beis. And then once that sugya starts, it doesn't really finish till the end of the parak. So I think we're just going to do that, hopefully. The good thing is that it's interesting stuff, and it isn't particularly difficult, I think. So hopefully it won't even be that long. I've got some coffee here. L'chaim. Okay, so we're going to start on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis at the 2 dots, about 10-15 lines from the bottom of Yud Beis Amud Beis. Al shar averis shabatere hakalos v'chamuros azdonos hashgagos chule. And all other averis, right, non-tumas mikdash v'kodoshav averis, whether kal, chomer, zodin, shogeg, etc., the sar hamishtaleach, the goat that is thrown off of the cliff, is mechaper for those. Hainu kalos, hainu esei, v'leisaisei, frekti gemare. I don't understand all of these categories. Right? I'm gonna flip back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah, I'm just gonna read the Mishnah inside. Al shara averish b'torah hakalos v'achamurus azdonis v'ashgogis hoda v'lo hoda esei v'lo saisei kresos misas bezdin. Why so many categories? It is actually redundant if you think about it. Hainu kalis, hainu esei v'lo saisei. When we're talking about the kalos, the sort of relatively lighter ones, we're talking about violating an essay or loisaise. Chamuros, the more stringent ones, hanu kresos, misas bezdin. So once already we say kalos, why do we have to say essay and loisaise? Once we say chamuros, why do we have to say kresos, misas bezdin? Hoda, hainu mezid, lo hoda, hainu shogeg. And once already, right, so if we're saying shogeg and mezid, why do we have to say hoda and lo hoda? Or aren't those the same things? He knew about it, he didn't know about it. Amr of Yehuda says, this is how to explain the Mishnah. You kind of like explain it by having sort of these like umbrella categories that are being opened up and defined. So Achikamer, Ashar Averis, when it comes to other Averis, Shebatorah, Bein Kalos, Bein Chamuros, okay, whether they are relatively lighter, whether they're relatively more severe, Bein Sha'ason, Bishogeg, Ben Shason b'mezid, and whether you did these sins, whether you sinned intentionally or unintentionally. Osan Shason b'shogeg. Now, among those that you did unintentionally, Ben noda lo sveikon, Ben lo noda lo sveikon, whether you were made known about the suffix or not. So Rashi says that this would be talking about, for example, in Asham Talui. Well, I guess we'll learn more about when Asham Taluid are offered. But for example, if you have 2 pieces of fat, one is shuman, which is kosher fat, one is chaylev, which is non-kosher fat that you'd be chayev karis for eating. And you ate one of those, and you have no clue if it's the chaylev or the shuman. So for that, you bring in ashram talui, right? A sort of a conditional, a dependent asham, that, just in case you ate the chaylev, you bring in asham. Meaning, if you definitely ate chaylev by accident, then you bring a chatas. But when you're not sure if you ate chaylev, you ate one of 2 pieces of fat, and it turns out that one of those 2 pieces was chaylev, so you're not sure, so you bring in asham tali. So bein nodalo sveikan, whether after the fact somebody said, oh, you ate one of those pieces of fat, by the way, one of them was chaylev, or whether nobody told him and he has no clue that he may have eaten chaylev. Either way, the Sayur Mishtaleach will be Mechaper. So even if he was made known and he needs to bring an Ashram Talui, the Sayur Mishtaleach will be Mechaper for somebody who's chayiv to bring an Ashram Talui, not somebody who's chayiv to bring a Korban Chatas. So I have to bring Korban Chatas for that. But an Ashram Talui it will be Mechaper for. Ve'elu ena kalos, and these are the relatively more lenient ones. Essay, velo saisei, mitzvahs essay, and mitzvahs lo saisei, ve'elu en chamuris, and these are the chamer ones, kresos, umisos, bezdin. Okay, so Rav Yehuda kind of explains the Mishnah in a way that it can be, it's like sort of breaking down and defining sort of larger categories into smaller categories. Okay. Chaim. Now, so now we get into an interesting discussion. I think the discussion so far has been somewhat interesting, but we're going to expand the interest. So, tell me more about this mitzvah's essay that the Sayur HaMishtaleach, right, that a person receives atonement from the Sayur HaMishtaleach because he, violated some mitzvah's essay. He didn't, he didn't eat matzah on the first night of Pesach. So I don't know, made something up. I assume that's a mitzvah's essay. Anyways. Hi essay chidami. Or let's say he didn't bring a Korban Pesach. I don't know. Anyways. Although if he didn't bring Korban Pesach, is that Kares? Anyway, okay, whatever. Hi essay chidami. Idlo abad tshuve. So this mitzvah's essay, if he didn't do tshuve, well then zevach Hashem te'eva. We have a concept that the offering of a nudnik is an abomination. So we're saying that the Sayur Mishtaleach is mechaper for a mitzvah's essay, but if it's a mitzvah's essay that he refuses to do tshuva on, or that he has not done tshuva on, well then how can the Sayur Mishtaleach be mechaper for something that he hasn't done tshuva for? Right? Zevach Hashem to'eva. The sacrifices, the offerings of wicked people are abomination. Either avad tshuva, and now if he did tshuva already, well then you don't have to wait for Yom Kippur to get atonement. Kol Yom Anami, any day of the year you can get atonement for a mitzvah's essay that you did tshuva for. The Tanya Avra mitzvah's essay also tshuva, that we learn in the Brisa that a person violates mitzvah's essay and he does tshuva, lo yizaz mishamach mechal le. Right? We don't, before he even moves, he's already been forgiven. So I don't understand what kind of mitzvah's essay a person would be getting atonement from the Sayur HaMishtaleach. If he didn't do tshuva, how could he be getting atonement? Zevach Hashem to'eva. If he did do tshuva, so then he already was been forgiven even before the Sayur HaMishtaleach from the time that he did tshuva. So Amar Reb Zeira says, Reb Zeira be'omed b'mardo. So it's talking about where he has not done tshuva. The Rebbe, our Mishnah, there's like some kind of funny light thing that's it's like a very particular light thing that's catching my left eye each time I sway back and forth. Our Mishnah is the opinion of Rebbe, who says that even if a person has not done tshuva, the Sayur HaMishtaleach will be mechaper. Rebbe, our Mishnah is Rebbe, the Tana that we learn in the Brisa, Rebbe Omer says, Rebbe, al kol averis shebateire, and all sins in the Holy Torah, bein asa tshuva, bein loy asa tshuva. Whether or not a person has done tshuva for that aveire, Yom HaKippurim mechaper, the Yom Kippur is mechaper, be'etzem the Sayur HaMishtaleach, and Yom Kippur is mechaper, even if you didn't do tshuva. Chutz miporek ol, 3 exceptions. One of them being somebody who's a kaifer, somebody who denies God. Megalapana Torah, somebody who belittles the Torah, like we learned about in Masechta Sanhedrin, right? It was Menashe was saying what? Moshe Rabbeinu has nothing better to do than to write, Rashi says over here, right? That Menashe says that what? He's got nothing better to do than write the psukim v'simno haisa pilegesh vayelech Reuven make sirchitim. What? Moshe Rabbeinu had nothing better to do. So if you megal upon him b'Torah, be inappropriate and making fun of the Torah. Umefer bris bibasar, somebody who's mefer his bris milah, either he refuses to get one or he reverses it. So those three averis are exceptional. She'im also tshuva, that in that case only if he did tshuva Yom Kippur mechaper. If he doesn't do tshuva, ein Yom Kippur mechaper. So then Yom Kippur won't be mechaper. So Rebbe's opinion is that actually you don't need Yom Kippur would be mechaper even if you didn't do tshuva. Yom Kippur is still mechaper. There are three exceptions to that. But other than those three exceptions, Yom Kippur will be mechaper even if you didn't do tshuva. By those three exceptions, however, Yom Kippur is mechaper only if you do tshuva. If you don't do tshuva by those three exceptions, then they're going to stick, those averos are going to stick with you even post Yom Kippur. My time with the Rebbe, what's the reason for Rebbe the Tana that we learn in the Brisa? That when the pasuk says that the word of God, he buzzed, I don't know, was disrespectful towards. That refers to a koifer and somebody who belittles the Torah. That's a reference to somebody who's mefer is bris milah. And then it says, hikaris tikaris. By those three averis, he shall surely get karis. Hikaris lifnei Yom Kippurim, tikaris la'achar Yom Kippurim. That he will get karis before Yom Kippurim, but also even after Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur will not be mechaper. Yochel afilu also tshuva. Is it possible that even if he did tshuva for these three averis, Yom Kippur will not be mechaper? Tamilomar avoina ba. It says that, and this, the sin is in it. Ki lo amarti ela bizman shavoina ba. Only when the sin is still there, only when he has not done tshuva. So by these three averis, if he has not done tshuva, so then he will still be chayiv kares even after Yom Kippur. If he's done tshuva, so Yom Kippur will be mechaper. But by all other averis, even if he didn't do tshuva, Yom Kippur will be mechaper. And therefore, our Mishnah, when it talks about the Sari Mishtaleach being mechaper for mitzvahs essay, and we're wondering what kind of mitzvahs essay would you need to rely on the Sari Mishtaleach for, the answer is for mitzvahs essay that you have not done tshuva for. And our Mishnah is Rebbe, who says that the Sari Mishtaleach will be mechaper even if you haven't done tshuva. V'rabbanon. And the rabbis who argue against Rebbe, and they say that even by regular averis, you would have to do tshuva in order for Yom Kippur to be mechaper. So then, so even by regular averis, if you haven't done tshuva, then Yom Kippur is not mechaper. Sorry for the double negative. So what do they do with this pasuk? That by these particular three, right? Rebbe explained this pasuk to be referring that by these particular three averis, you will still be chayav post Yom Kippur when you haven't done tshuva. But the Rabbanan will say that that's the case even by other averis. So then, what do the rabbis do with this pasuk? How do they understand this pasuk? For Rabbanan, with regard to these three averis, he kares ba'olam hazeh. You will get kares in. So by these three averis, you will get kares in this world, tikares olam haba, and continue to receive kares even in the next world. Avoina ba shem asa tshuva v'meis misum merekes. When it says avoina ba, it means so long as they have not done tshuva. But if they have done tshuva, so then when they die, well then they will be forgiven. But not before then. So kilu, when it comes to, so the way that they understand the way that the rabbis understand this pasuk is that when it comes to these three avonis, if you don't do tshuva, not only will you be chayiv kares, right? Tikares, not only will you be chayiv kares in this world, but even in the world to come. But it says avona ba. However, if you do tshuva, however, then at least, so you won't get atonement before you die, but when you die, right, etzem, your death itself will be mechaper. Okay, gewaldig. All right, I'm going to drink a little bit of coffee. Umimotzis mukmas lo kirebi. But can we really say that our Mishnah is Rebbe? But v'hami the sefer Reb Yehudahi, Reshanami Reb Yehudahi. But since the sefer of this statement, right? So if we go back to the Mishnah, what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah had said, I'm going to read again. Ashar ve'reshabatera akalos v'achmuros azdonos v'ashkogos hoda v'lo hoda ese v'lo saise kresis misas bezdin servishtalech mechaper. And then it continues and it says, and this is what we're talking about now, echod Yisraelim ve'echod kehanim ve'echod mashuach kohen mashuach. Yisraelim, kohanim, and the kohen gadol. That, as we're going to learn on Yud Gimel Amud Beis, is the opinion of Rab Yehuda. And therefore, the Gemara asks, Umimatzis mukmas lak Rebbe, I'm reading that again, can you really say that this Mishnah, the whole thing with the Sar Mishtaleach and all of the Averis, Shogeg, Mezid, etc., 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 how can we say that that is Rebbe? The Sefer of Yehuda, because when it says Echad Yisraelim ve'echad Kehanim ve'echad Kol Mashuach, that, as we're going to see on Yud Gimel Beis, is the opinion of Reb Yehuda. And therefore, if that part of the statement, if the final part of the statement is Reb Yehuda, it makes sense to assume that the first part of the statement is the same person, that the entire statement is the same person, is Reb Yehuda. So Reishanami, Reb Yehuda, the first part must also be Reb Yehuda and not Rebbe. The Katani Seifa, that it says at the Seifa, Echad Yisrael, ve'echad Koyanim, ve'echad Koyin Mashuach, Uman Islay, Hai Svare, and who is the one who holds this way? Reb Yehuda. It's Reb Yehuda's opinion that the Sari Mishtalech is Mechaper for Yisraelim, Kohanim, Kohen Gadol, when it comes to Shar Averis. So Mechlad the Reisha, Reb Yehuda, implying that if the Seifa is Reb Yehuda, well then the Reisha must also first be, right, the first part of the statement must also be Reb Yehuda. Rav Yosef says, Rav Yosef, Rebbe here, actually the Mishnah is in fact Rebbe, V'savar lak Reb Yehuda, and with regard to Echad Yisraelim, Echad Kehanim, Echad Kohen Mashuach, yes, it's true that is Reb Yehuda's opinion. Rebbe agrees with Reb Yehuda there. So that entire statement, the Reisha and the Seifa are Rebbe, and with regard to Echad Yisraelim, Echad Kehanim, Echad Kohen Mashuach, Rebbe agrees with his Rebbe, Reb Yehuda, right? Rebbe had a bunch of Rebbes. We've seen that his Rebbes were also Reb Meir, Reb Shimon, right? That whole kind of, we've seen, I don't know if he was directly a student of Reb Yossi, but it definitely, we've definitely seen encounters with Reb Yishmael, Reb Yossi, where he was just talking about Reb Yossi. Reb Akiva had several students, right? Reb Yehuda, Reb Meir, Reb Shimon, Reb Yossi, Reb Elazar, Reb Nechemia. And it seems that Rebbe, who was like the next generation, he kind of learned, like they were like kind of all his teachers, it seems. Anyways, so with regard to Echad Yisraelim, Echad Kehanim, Echad Kohen Mashuach, Rebbe agrees with Reb Yehuda. So it's all Rebbe's statement, and it's true that the Seifa aligns with Reb Yehuda's opinion. But the entire statement is Rebbe. Amle Abaye. Now Abaye asks his Rebbe, Rav Yosef, Davke Ka'omar Mar, when you say that Rebbe holds like Reb Yehuda, were you, being very specific in your wording? Rebbe Savar lak Reb Yehuda, Aval Reb Yehuda lo Savar lak Rebbe? You're saying that Davka, Rebbe holds like Reb Yehuda with regard to Echad Yisraelim, Echad Kehanim, ve'echad Kohen Mashuach. However, is that to imply that the inverse is not true? Reb Yehuda does not agree with Rebbe that Yom Kippur is mechaper even when you haven't done tshuva, right? That was Rebbe's opinion. Even if you, right, by Shara Averis, even if you don't, right, there were 3 exceptions, but other than those, even if you don't do tshuva, Yom Kippur is mechaper. And then Rebbe continues to say, Echad Kohanim, Echad Yisraelim, etc. We're saying there, Rebbe agrees with Rabbi Yehuda. Does Rabbi Yehuda agree with Rebbe with regard to the first part of the statement? Which part of it is that Yom Kippur is mechaper even if you haven't done tshuva? O Dilma, or perhaps, right, so does Rabbi Yehuda disagree with Rebbe on that? O Dilma, or perhaps, Mida Rebbe Sover La Rabbi Yehuda, Af Rabbi Yehuda Sover La Nami Karebi. Or perhaps, just like Rebbe agrees with Rabbi Yehuda also agrees with Rebbe. So why didn't we say that Rabbi Yehuda agrees with Rebbe? Miu orcha de milsa katani lememer de Talmud Sover La But the reason why we don't explicitly say that Rabbi Yehuda agrees with Rebbe, because that wouldn't make sense, because Rabbi Yehuda was Rebbe's Rebbe. Right? Rebbe was a student of Rabbi Yehuda. It makes sense to say that the student agrees with his teacher. You wouldn't really say that a teacher agrees with his student. That's right. You would say that the student agrees with the Rebbe. So Abaye asks Rav Yosef, okay, when you're saying that Rebbe agrees with Rabbi Yehuda, does that imply that Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with Rebbe with regard to Yom Kippur being mechaper when you haven't done tshuva? Or does Rabbi Yehuda agree with Rebbe, just that we're not going to say that Rabbi Yehuda agrees with Rebbe because that's like disrespectful to Rabbi Yehuda because he's a teacher. Amle in Dafka Ka'amina, to which Rav Yosef responds, he says, I was being specific, and that Rebbe Savalak Rabbi Yehuda, that while Rebbe holds like Rabbi Yehuda with regard to Echad Yisraelim, Echad Kradim, Echad Kohen Mashuach, Aval Rabbi Yehuda lo Savalak Rebbe, Rabbi Yehuda does not agree with Rebbe with regard to Yom Kippur being mechaper, even when you haven't done tshuva. Rabbi Yehuda would say that you have to do tshuva for Yom Kippur to be mechaper. The Tanya, as we learn in the Brisa, Yochel Yehei Yom Kippur mechaper al shovim ve'al she'enon shovim. That we learn in the Brisa, is it possible that Yom Kippur will be mechaper regardless if you've done tshuva, for those who have done tshuva and even for those who have not done tshuva? V'din hu. So we say, well, it's logical. Ha'il v'chatos v'oshem mechaperin. Well, since a korban chatos atones, right? A person accidentally was mechal Shabbos, brings a korban chatos, so he gets atonement. And a korban, when you have to bring a korban asham, so you bring a korban asham and you get atonement. Mechaperin. What else is mechaper? V'yom Kippur mechaper. Yom Kippur also is something that is mechaper. So chatos and an asham are mechaper. Yom Kippur once a year is mechaper. Machatas v'asham ein mechaper ela al hashavim al hashavim. So just like Yom Kippur, just like a korban chatos and a korban asham are only going to provide atonement if the person bringing the korban does tshuva. You can't just bring a korban chatas and get atonement if you don't actually want, if you don't actually regret what you did. You have to do tshuva and tshuva together. So when you bring a korban chatas and you've done tshuva, then you get atonement. So af Yom Kippurim, and therefore says the Brisa, Yom Kippur works the same way. And mechaper elo ala shovim. That Yom Kippur is mechaper only if you've done tshuva. If you've done tshuva, so then Yom Kippur as a mechanism will be mechaper. But one second, fact the Gemara, wait, but I could argue that Yom Kippur will be mechaper even if you haven't done tshuva, because ma'alechatas v'asham she'ein mechaper ala mezid kishogeg, because after all, a korban chatas, korban asham, generally speaking, are only mechaper for a shogeg. If you're intentionally mechal Shabbos, you can't bring a korban chatas for that. That's karis. So korban chatas and korban asham are be'etzem only mechaper for shogeg, not for mezid. Tomer liyom ha'kippurim shemechaper al hamezid kishogeg. But Yom Kippur is sort of a more broad atonement in that on Yom Kippur you can get kapara even for intentional sins if you do tshuva. So we're going to argue now. So I'll say, so let me maybe perhaps argue that since Yom Kippur is sort of a broader kapara in that it can be mechaper even for mezids, so maybe I'll say that Yom Kippur is mechaper. Guess what? Even if you didn't do tshuva, it's mechaper too. It's a broader kapara than just a regular korban chatas. Regular korban chatas is only for shogeg. You have to do tshuva in order for it to work. Maybe Yom Kippur just like is mechaper not only for shogeg but also for mezid, guess what? Maybe it's mechaper even if you didn't even do tshuva. So Talmud Lomer ach chalek, that the pasuk says ach be'esel hachodesh hashvi'i hazeh yom kippurim, etc. Ach, and as Rashi points out, achin v'rakin miyutin, that ach is a limiting word, and it's limiting to say that Yom Kippur is not mechalik when you haven't done tshuva. Sorry for the double negative. Yom Kippur is only mechaper when you've done tshuva. So yes, Yom Kippur is mechaper for shogeg and mezid. However, you have to do tshuva, stam sifra, money, Rabbi Yehuda. And as we learned in Masechta Sanhedrin, that by default a sifra, which is Toras Kahanim and Sefer Vayikra. So that is, I don't think it's in this week's parsha, but anyways, actually Taka, maybe when you're learning this stuff, it might Taka be in, I think maybe it's Parshas Emor. Anyways, where are we? So this is in the Medrash halacha of Sefer Vayikra in Toras Kahanim, and by default, an unattributed brisa in Toras Kahanim is Rabbi Yehuda. So we see that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that you would have to do tshuva in order to get kapara on Yom Kippur. So we see that Rabbi Yehuda does not agree with Rabbi. Rabbi says you can get atonement on Yom Kippur even if you haven't done tshuva. Rabbi Yehuda says to get atonement on Yom Kippur you have to do tshuva. V'ka'amar, Rabbi Yehuda is saying shavim in, lo shavim lo. That only if you've done tshuva can you get atonement on Yom Kippur, not if you haven't done tshuva. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with Rabbi. Rami stam sifra, but one second. There's another stam sifra. There's another unattributed default brisa in Toras Kahanim that we would say apparently is also Reb Yehuda, because stam sifra Reb Yehuda, and yet it contradicts this. The Tana that we learn in the brisa, Yachol lo yehei yom akipurim mechaper ela imkein hisan eboy. Is it possible that in order for Yom Kippur to be mechaper, you would have to participate. You'd have to be misane. You'd have to fast. You'd have to, do not wear leather shoes. All the things that we don't do. All the inuyim, the chomish inuyim of Yom Kippur. So it's possible that even Yachol lo ye Yom Kippur mechaper ela imkein nisanabo. Is it possible that Yom Kippur is only mechaper if you do what you're supposed to do? Ukro mikra kodesh, and you daven, right? Rashi says, right. The Baruch Atah Hashem. What does it say? B'berachos of Lomi Mekadesh Yisov Yom Kippurim, right? To make the proper brachas in the davening, I guess. Where am I? V'lo asa bo melacha, and you don't do melacha. Kilo, you're celebrating Yom Kippur. I don't know what the right word is. But what if lo is anabo? What if he didn't do the 5 inuyim, right? He ate, let's say. V'lo kro mikra kodesh, and he didn't go to shul. V'asabo melacha, and he was doing work. Mamish was mechalel Yom Kippur. Is Yom Kippur mechaper? If he's mamish, clearly he's not doing tshuva. He's davka violating Yom Kippur. He's being mechalel Yom Kippur. Will Yom Kippur be mechaper? Minayin, how do you know that Yom Kippur is mechaper? Tamilum Yom Kippurimu mikol makom. That it's Yom Kippur. Yom Kippurim will nevertheless be mechaper. So interesting. So we have 2 conflicting brises in Toras Kahanim. One brisa says you have to do tshuva to get kapara on Yom Kippur, and we were saying that that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. But there's another stam brisa in Toras Kahanim, which we would assume by default is Rabbi Yehuda, but it's saying fakert. It's saying even if you're mechal Yom Kippur is still mechaper for having been mechal Yom Kippur. So Amar Abai leikasha Rabbi Yehuda. So Abai says, okay, we have 2 conflicting brises in Toras Kahanim. So you know what? The first brisa is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, that you have to do tshuva to get kapar in Yom Kippur. The second brisa is talking the opinion of Rebbe, that even if you don't do tshuva, you can still get kapara on Yom Kippur. Rava Omar says, Rava, Hava Rebbe. So Rava says that actually both opinions are Rebbe. Both are the opinions of Rebbe. The second brisa is kind of what we're more familiar with from Rebbe, that even if you don't do tshuva, Yom Kippur is still mechaper. And the first brisa, which says that you have to do tshuva, that is talking about for being mechal Yom Kippur itself. So meaning, if 2 weeks before Yom Kippur you're mechal Shabbos, so Yom Kippur will be mechaper for that. Okay? Even if you didn't do tshuva, Yom Kippur is going to be mechaper. But if on Yom Kippur you're doing malacha on Yom Kippur and you're eating and you're being mechal Yom Kippur, which the Torah says you chayiv kares for, well, for that Yom Kippur is not going to be mechaper for that. You would have to do tshuva. Okay, if you mechal Yom Kippur brazenly, Yom Kippur is not going to be mechal for that. Let's go weiter. Right, so Rav Amar Hava Rebbe. I'm reading that again, actually. Right, that Rava says both brises are Rebbe, and in the first brisa, which says that you have to do tshuva, umod Rebbe bekaris the yom. That Rebbe, however, admits that when it comes to the chiyuv karis of Yom Kippur itself, you would have to do tshuva. You can't just be mechal Yom Kippur and get kapara for being mechal Yom Kippur. If you're mechal Shabbos 2 weeks earlier, so Yom Kippur can be mechaper for that, but it is not going to be mechaper for the fact that you're being mechal Yom Kippur itself. Because if you don't say so, karis the Yom Kippurim l'Rebbe leisle. Then if that's the case, when the Torah says that you chayiv karis for being mechal Yom Kippur, how? Right? The Torah says if you're mechal Yom Kippur, you chayiv karis. So do we even have that pasuk here? I don't know. Anyways, so the Torah says mechal Yom Kippur, you chayiv karis. Now, if Rebbe says that even if you're mechal Yom Kippur is mechaper, so then memeli you're not chayiv karis. So therefore, Rebbe has to say that if you're mechal Yom Kippur, then you're going to be chayiv karis. Yom Kippur can't be mechaper. For that, the Torah says you chayiv karis from mechal Yom Kippur. If Yom Kippur is mechaper, then memeli you're not chayiv karis from mechal Yom Kippur because Yom Kippur is mechaper. But other than that, Yom Kippur would be mechaper even if you didn't do tshuva. But the Gemara pushes back against Rav. You can say that according to Rebbe, Yom Kippur is mechaper. You can say, I hope nobody's knocking at the door. Anyways, yeah, we got to think here. The Gemara pushes back against Rava and says that even if Rebbe says that Yom Kippur is mechaper for Michal Yom Kippur, it doesn't automatically mean that there's no chiyuv kares on Yom Kippur because, for example, right? It says that the day of Yom Kippur is mechaper. What if a person is mechal Yom Kippur at night and then dies that night? So he won't get kapara. So you can say that Yom Kippur itself is mechaper for being mechal Yom Kippur, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you can never have a scenario where it'd be chayiv kares for violating Yom Kippur. For example, if you were mechal Yom Kippur at night and then died, you won't have the opportunity to get kapara for that. So you will be chayiv kares for being mechal Yom Kippur, but you won't get the atonement because you're dead by Yom Hazeh Yichaper Aleichem. Ela Ema, but then I'll say kares diyamam l'Rebbe leisei. Okay, but if that's the case, still we'll push back and say that well then how, right? It says be'etzem hayom hazeh. What does Rashi say? Because the pasuk is be'etzem hayom hazeh on by Yom Kippur. So then, okay, fine. So if he dies at night, then there'll be a chiyuv kares. But what about the fact that the Torah also says be'etzem hayom hazeh? That it sounds like according to Rebbe, if he can't actually be mechalel. What does the pasuk say? So then, according to Rebbe, when the pasuk says that somebody who's mechal Yom Kippur on the day of Yom Kippur, he gets kares, how are you going to have that? Because we're saying that Mamele is going to get atonement. Well, No, you can still say that Yom Kippur is mechaper even for being mechal Yom Kippur, but what if a person ate and then while he was eating, he choked to death and he mamish immediately after sinning died and Yom Kippur never had an opportunity for Yom Kippur to be mechaper because he was already dead, he died instantly. Alternatively, if he was mechal Yom Kippur mamash right at the end of Ne'ilah, right before Shkia, and he was mechal Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur was over. There was no opportunity to get kapar. So Rava's argument to say that Rebbe has to say that there's no kapara for being mechal Yom Kippur, because then how do you have a chiyuv kares b'chlal? The Gemara says I could find ways that you can have a chiyuv kares right there. That's not a strong enough argument. Okay, that was an interesting discussion and explanation of Rebbe's opinion with regard to kapara and Yom Kippur. Okay, we're only about halfway through the daf. I guess let's end it up. Yeah, I mean, I knew it was going to be a long one, but I thought maybe it would move a little quicker. But it is interesting subject matter, I think. Maybe the next part will go quicker. Who knows? Okay. Echad Yisrael v'echad kan v'echad kohen mashuach. Okay, so we had said that the soyer hamishtaleach, the soyer la'azozel is mechaper for shar averis, for non-tumas mikdash v'kadosh of averis, let's say chilul Shabbos, whatever. And that is the same whether you are a kohen, Yisrael, whatever. Kohen Gadol makes no difference. So Ki'ilu, for Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashov, so you have the Soyer Anaisa B'Fnim, and for the Kehanim, you have the Par Anaisa B'Fnim, the Par Kohen Gadol, that's for the Kehanim. But when it comes to Shar Averis, then everyone is the same, it's the Soyer La'azazel. Hagufa Kasha. However, there's inherently a question, because Katani echad Yisrael v'echad kan v'echad kohen mashuach. On the one hand, as we just quoted, and we've quoted a few times already today, that the Soyer Mishtaleach is mechaper for Yisrael, Yisraelim, Kohanim, even the Kohen Gadol. V'hadutani, but then when the Mishnah continues, what does it say right after that? Ma ben Yisrael l'Kohanim v'kohen mashuach. What are the differences between Yisraelim, Kohanim, and the Kohen Gadol? I don't understand. We just said that they're all the same. Now we're saying how are they different? Rav Yehuda says no problem. This is how to read the Mishnah, how to explain the Mishnah. Echad Yisrael v'echad kan v'echad kohen mashuach miskapim b'soyer mishtaleach b'shar averis ve'in chiluk b'neihem. That when it comes to shar averis, other averis, they're all the same. Yisraelim, Kehanim, Kohen Gadol, they're all the same. The Soyer mishtaleach is mechaper for shar averis. Uma bein Yisrael l'Kohanim v'l'kohen mashuach. Then where are there differences between them? The difference is that while for Yisraelim the Soyer Anaisa B'Fnim, and also I guess the Soyer Anaisa B'Chutz, is mechaper for Tumas Mikdash v'Kodoshav by Kohanim, it is the Par Hanaisa Bifnim. That is the difference. That by Tumas Mikdash v'Kodoshav, for the Kohanim, it is the Par Hanaisa Bifnim. For Yisraelim, it is the Soyer. It's definitely the Soyer Hanaisa Bifnim. I think it's also the Soyer Hanaisa B'Chutz. Does Rashi say anything? I don't know. Okay. Anyways. Alright, yeah. Rashi doesn't say anything. Okay, fine. I assume that's what it means. Umani Rabbi Yehuda. And this, as we had said earlier, is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. This Echad Yisraelim, Echad Kohanim, Echad Kohen Mashuach, that is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda the Tanya that we learned in a Brisa. V'chiper es mikdash akodesh, that when it says that, and the Soyer Anaisa B'Fnim will be mechaper. What is it? V'chiper es mikdash, ba'avodas par v'soyer shel Kippurim ksiv. This is by the par and the Soyer of Yom Kippurim, which is mechaper and tumas mikdash v'kodashim. So it says v'chiper as mikdash hakodesh zelefnai v'lefnim. Okay, that will be mechaper for v'fnai v'lefnim. Rashi says zelefnai v'lefnim al tuma she'ira lefnai v'lefnim kigon nitma lefnai v'lefnim. For example, if you became tummy inside the kodesh hakodashim. Es oil moyed zehechel For example, if it became Tomei in the Heichel. Mizbeach kimashmo. Okay, Mizbeach. It's talking about the Mizbeach. Yechaper elu azaris. That's the if you go into the azar in a state of tuma. Okay. What does that say? Rashi says by the Mizbeach Hazav. You make your ketoras betuma. If you're maktir ketoras when you're tummy. Okay. When we say Kohanim, kimashmo, it's talking about Kohanim. Amakol, the people, Elu Yisrael, that is the Yisraels. Yichaper Elu Levim, and that's the Levim. So you have the Kohanim, Yisraelim, and Levim. Hushvu kulan lichapara achas. So you have Kohanim, Yisraelim, and Levim. They're all tzazam, they're all together for the same kapara. In what way? That they all get kapara for shar averis when it comes to the sar hamishtalech b'shar averis of Yehuda. That is of Yehuda's opinion. Reb Shimon Omer says, Reb Shimon kishem shedam soyer anayse b'fnim mechaper ayisah al tumas mikdash v'kodashav kach dam apar mechaper al kohanim al tumas mikdash v'kodashav. Says Reb Shimon that actually, just like when it comes to tumas mikdash v'kodashav, there is a difference between Kohanim and Yisraelim. For Yisraelim, it is the dam of the Sarah Naisa B'fnim, whereas for Kohanim, it is the dam of the Para Naisa B'fnim, the Para Kohen Gadol. So, Uchshem, Sheviduyo Shel Sarah Amishtalech Mechaper Yisrael B'shar Averis, Kach Viduyo Shel Par Mechaper Al Kohanim B'shar Averis. And then Reb Shimon continues and he says, and just like when it comes to other Averis, the vidui on the par hamishtalech, the Sar Azazel, is mechaper for shar Averis for Yisraelim, says Reb Shimon, by shar Averis for Kohanim, it's from the vidui of the par hanaise bifnim. Okay, so there's a par hanaise bifnim and a sar hanaise bifnim, just like the dam of the sar hanaise bifnim is mechaper for tumas mikdash v'kodashav for Yisraelim. Also, the dam of the par hanaise bifnim, and par kohen gadol, is what's mechaper for Kohanim for tumas mikdash v'kodashav, right? So the dam of both korbanos are mechaper for tumas mikdash v'kodashav for Kohanim and Yisraelim respectively. Now there is a vidui on the sar la'azazel and there's a vidui on the par kohen gadol. So Reb Shimon continues and says that also there's a difference when it comes to shar averos, that it's the vidui of the sar mishtaleach b'shar averos by Yisraelim, and it is the vidui of the par kohen gadol, that's what's mechaper b'shar averos for Kohanim. So basically, Reb Shimon is saying that the sar mishtaleach is not mechaper for shar averos for Kohanim. Right? Shar averos for Kohanim is from the vidui on the par kohen gadol. Reb Shimon avadai hujvu. But now, according to Reb Shimon, I mean, right, what does he do with the pasuk? We had quoted a pasuk earlier that it said. Well, what did we say? We said Kohanim kimashmon amakol elu Yisrael yichaper elu Levim hushvu kulan l'chapara achas. Right. So we had learned from a pasuk that Yisraelim, Kohanim, Levim, everybody is the same when it comes to kapara. In what way? Rabbi Yehuda says for the sari mishtaleach b'shar averis. In what way are they all tzazamen by kapara according to Reb Shimon? One second. I just want to see if they're still power washing. They power wash so much. Anyways, Reb Shimon havadai hushvu. According to Reb Shimon, right, they're definitely brought together. In what way? So my hushvu dibnei kapara ninu. Says Reb Shimon, yeah, they're all the same. Kohanim, Yisraelim, Levim, in that all of them have kapara. For Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashav, for Shara Averis, all of them, whether you're Kohen, whether you're Yisrael, whether you're Levi, you can get kapara for Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashav, for Shara Averis. Miyu, however, Kochad V'Chad V'Chaper B'Denafshe. But each person, depending on if you're a Kohen or Yisrael, is going to have kapara differently. Right? Yisraelim are going to be from the Sar Mishtaleach, Kohanim are going to be from the Kohen Gadol. But they all can get kapara. My time with Reb Shimon, how come Reb Shimon says this? Well, because the pasuk says, and he takes the two goats. Okay, one for the Lashem, one Lazazel. Iskash sar amishtalech l'sar anaisa b'fnim. So the two goats, the sar Lazazel and the sar Lashem, the sar amishtalech and the sar anaisa b'fnim. We're comparing the two of them. Masar anaisa b'fnim. Well, just like the Sa'ir Hanaisa B'fnim is not Mechaper for Kohanim when it comes to Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashav D'chsib because it says Asher La'am, that this is the Sa'ir Hanaisa B'fnim is for the Yisraelim. So we compare that also to the Sa'ir Amishtalech, Af Sa'ir Mishtaleach and Mechaper Al Kohanim B'Shar Averos. So too, the Sar Mishtalech is also not Mechaper for Kohanim Bishar Averos. That comes from the Vidoy of the Par Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Lach, Rabbi Yehuda will respond and he'll say that the Sar Mishtalech is Mechaper for Kohanim Bishar Averos. Lachi Iskush, that this is the fact that the Sar Naisa B'fnim and the Sar Mishtalech are compared to each other. That's just to say, Shayu Shavim, that they should look the same. Bimari, they should look the same. Of a koma, they should have the same height. Of a domim, and I assume that means value. Huda asa, that's why it's coming. Right? That's what it's coming to say. They should be similar in that ways, but not to say that just like the Sar Nasa B'fnim is only Mechaper for Yisrael, also the Sar Mishtalech is only Mechaper for Yisrael. Rabbi Yehuda does not hold of that. Freg de Gemara, Mantane Laha, the Tanu Rabbanan, who is the author of the following brayso? V'shachat es sirachatas asher la'am, that the Kohen Gadol slaughters the Sar Anaisa B'fnim, that is for the people, for the Yisraels. She'ein ha-Kohanim miskaprin bo, that the Kohanim do not get kapara from it. Right? This is talking about the Sar Anaisa B'fnim, right? I think so. Why not? Anyways. Where am I? Yeah, of course, because Sar Lazazel will be chucked off the mountain. Okay. So he slaughters the Sar Anaisa B'fnim that's for the Yisraels. She'ein ha-Kohanim miskaprin bo, that the Kohanim do not get kapara from the Sar Anaisa B'fnim. Uvameh miskaprin, what do they get kapara from? B'paro shel Aharon, from the par shel Aharon, from the cow that's slaughtered and that the blood is sprinkled b'fnim. Yachol lo yiskapu b'par shel Aharon. Maybe the Kohanim should not get kapara from Aharon's par. Shevik v'nemer asher lo. It says his cow. Right? It says par chadas asher lo, his cow. Miatein then kapara, which would mean that the Kohanim then would not get any kapara at all. That they wouldn't get any kapara at all. Because if we're going to say that it says la'am for the Sar Anaisa B'fnim, so for the Yisraels and not for the Kohanim, and it says by the par shel Aharon, parachat is asher lo, that is only for him, not for the Kohanim, then that would mean that the Kohanim are not getting any kapara at all. Right? If we say that it's only for the Kohen Gadol, not for the other Kohanim, then it means that they're not getting any kapara at all. Not for Tumas Mikdash for Kodashav, not for Shar Averis. Right? Mi'ata edem kapara. Well, Kishu Omer, when it says Yechaper ala Kohanim, when the pasuk then says that it will be Mechaper for the Kohanim, like it says Kilu V'chiper as Mikdash HaKodesh V'ez Oil Moed V'ez Mizbech Yechaper V'ala Kohanim V'akol Amakol Yechaper. So Matzinu len kapar. So we see that the Kohanim do get kapar. But Mayin miskaprin. Okay, so then where are they going to get kapara from? So clearly the Kohanim do get kapara. So where are they getting this kapara from? Mutav she'iskapu par shel Aharon. Well, it makes sense that their kapara would be from the par shel Aharon sharihuta mechlalo etzel beso. Because it says right by the par shel Aharon, it says v'chiper baido vad beso. It's not just for him, but also for his house. So once already we're making exceptions for his house. So it would make sense also to say that it also includes the Kohanim. It does not make sense to say that their kapara comes from the Sar Anaisa B'fnim, because that's only for the Yisraelim, and there are no exceptions to that. That there is no exceptions to that for his house or anything like that. So once already we're making exception for the Par Chatos Asher Lo, that it also it works for his family, so it also works for the other Kohanim. And if you're going to question this, and the Gemara later on is going to ask what kind of question you're going to ask, but just in case you have questions, Arei Omer, the pasuk says, Beis Aharon Baruch Hu Hashem, Beis Halevi Baruch Hu Hashem, Yirei Hashem Baruch Hu Hashem. So we see that Beis Aharon, which is the Kohanim, are referred to as Beis Aharon. So when it says V'chiper Ba'ado V'ad Beiso, well, the Kohanim generally are included in Beiso. So rest assured that their kapara, that the kapara of the Kohanim comes from the Par Shel Aharon. So back to our question, Mantana. So who is the author of this Braise? One second. Yeah, because ultimately the question was, as I kind of like set up a few minutes ago, the question is that we had a havmina to say that, well, if we're saying that the Kohanim do not get kapara from the Sarah Naisa Bifnim, because that's for the Yisraelim, and if we say that the Par Shel Aharon is Asher Lo, it's only his, not for the Kohanim, well then that means that they wouldn't get any kapara at all, not even from the Sarah Mishtaleach. Kilu, if we're going to say that the Par Shel Aharon does not include the Kohanim, then they would not get any kapar at all. Not for Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshav, not for Shar Averis. Nothing. So, Matana, who's the author of the Brisa? Amar Rav Yirmiyah Delo Rabbi Yehuda. Well, that's not the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Di Rabbi Yehuda, if we're talking about Rabbi Yehuda, Ha'amar Kohanim Yishlem Kapar B'Sar Mishtaleach. At least, they would have had kapar by Shar Averis for the Sar Mishtaleach. So Umani, so who is it? Rav Omer says Rav Reb Shimon. It's rather the opinion of Reb Shimon, who says that the kapare for Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshav as well as for Shar Averis for the Kohanim is all from the Par Shel Aharon, and therefore if we're saying that the Par Shel Aharon does not include the rest of the Kohanim, that means that they wouldn't get any kapara at all. Right? So Reb Shimon, the Omar Kohanim Ein Lem Kapara B'Sar Mishtaleach. That Reb Shimon says that the Kohanim do not get any kapara at all from the Sar Mishtaleach. All of their kapara comes from the Par Shel Aharon. Abaye Omar says, Abaye Afilu Teim Rabbi Yehuda. You can actually even say that the Brisa is Rabbi Yehuda, and that when it says that if the Kohanim don't get kapara from the Par Shel Aharon, then they wouldn't be getting kapara at all. Hachi Kamar means me'atein lem kapara b'tumas mikdash v'kadashav. It means that they wouldn't have kapara at all for tumas mikdash v'kadashav, but for Shar Averis, they could still get kapara from the Sar Mishtaleach. Kishu Omer Yichaper al Kohanim Matzinu Sheish Lem Kapara b'Shar Averis. But Abaye continues that then the Brisa. Abaye explains the Brisa by saying that then when it says that that the Kohanim get kapara, that means that they get kapara by other Averis. So if they get kapara, so therefore, and therefore, just like we see that they have kapara by other averis, by the Sari Mishtaleach, according to Rabbi Yehuda, so just like by Shar averis they have kapara, well then they're also going to have kapara. There's also going to be a way for them to get kapara by Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav, Bamei Miskaprim. Well then, where are they getting that kapara from? By Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav, it's either coming from the Par Shel Aharon or from the Saira Naisa Bifnim. Mutav Sheiskapi B'Par Shel Aharon. It makes more sense that they would get kapara from the Par Shel Aharon. Sharihutu Michlalo Eitza Beso, because already there are exceptions made that it also includes his family. V'Al Yiskapi B'Saira Naisa Bifnim Sharei Lo Huter Michlalo, rather than to say that their kapara comes from the Saira Naisa Bifnim. Since that is only for the Yisraelim and there are no exceptions to that. And if you're going to question this reasoning, Hareyu Omer Beis Aharon Baruch Hu Hashem Gomer. Well, the pasuk says Beis Aharon Baruch Hu Hashem, referring to Beis Aharon being the Kohanim, being Beis Aharon. So when it says V'chiper Baido Vad Beiso Memele, it includes the Kohanim. Umay Im Nafsh Chaloma. When we say, and if you're going to question this reasoning, what's the question that you're going to ask? V'chitema, if you're going to suggest Beiso Ksiv, if you're going to say, but it says his house, Kulan Kurian Beiso, well, all the Kohanim are called his house. Shenemar Beis Aharon Baruch Hu Hashem, Beis Halevi Baruch Hu Hashem, Yirei Hashem Baruch Hu Hashem, and the Beis Aharon is referring to the Kohanim. They're called Beis Aharon. Now, Frekti Gemara, V'hai Asher La'am La'ach Yuda. Also, we assume that when it says Asher La'am, when it says by the Sarah Naisa Bifnim Asher La'am, it means that it's for the Yisraelim. Is that really what Asher La'am is coming to teach? Haimi Baile, the Ka'amar Rachmana mide'am lehave. We need Asher La'am to teach, not that it only is mechaper for the Israels, but that who pays for this goat? The people pay for the goat. Aharon doesn't pay for this goat. The people, the tzibur pays for the goat. Ume'es adas b'nei Yisrael nafkano. That is now from Ume'es adas b'nei Yisrael, from the congregation of Israel. Asher La'am is to say that it's only for the Israels. And similarly, when it says Asher Lo, for him, we want to say it's for him and for nobody else. We want it to say. So, but is that really what it's coming for? Is that how to learn Asher Lo? Asher Lo is needed for the following brisa. Asher Lo, Mishalo, who maybe, that when it says Asher Lo, it means that he's the one who pays for it. Ve'enu maybe Mishal Tzibur, the Tzibur, the public does not pay for his cow, for the Parshal Aharon. Is it possible? Okay, fine. So it makes sense that the tzibur, the broad tzibur, does not pay for his par because they are not getting a kapara from it. But maybe he can have his fellow kohanim pay for it since they are getting kapara from his cow. Asher Lo. It says a second time, Asher Lo. No, he's got to pay for it. Okay, fine. But kosher. Is it possible? Okay, fine. He's got to pay for it. But what if other people paid for it? Maybe it's still kosher. A third time, shuv. A third time, Asher Lo. His. Hakasuv shana olav le'akev. The pasuk keeps on reiterating Asher Lo, that it's his, to make the point that it must be, he must pay for it, and that is that's a blocker. He must pay for it. Nobody else can pay for his cow. Tana achi sonu. So we said, does Asher Lo come to exclude everybody else, or is it coming to say that he needs to pay for it? Well, Tana achi kakashale. This is what the Tana was wondering. My shno b'de'am delo mechaper delo kachasri be'mamona. Well, how come the Parshal Aharon is not mechaper for the rest of the nation? Well, because they aren't paying for it. Right, when it comes to the Sa'ir, so we said, right, it says, Ume'es adas b'nei Yisrael, that they pay for it and they get kapara from it. They don't get kapara from the Parshal Aharon, they didn't pay for it. They didn't invest in it. Right? So, Mechaber delo chasu b'mamona, l'chsiv asher la'am. Wait, what? Where am I? Ma'ishno b'do'am delo mechaber delo chasri b'mamona, l'chsiv asher la'am. Okay, that it means that it's for them and not for, I think that's right. It's for them, it's not for anybody else. And therefore he didn't pay for it, so therefore he doesn't get kapar. So, but the Harinami, and also, I guess, like, right, the Kohanim, I guess, aren't getting kapar from it. Again, it says Asher La'am. But the Harinami lo kachasu b'mamona, well, the Kohanim also aren't investing anything in Aharon's par, we just said it has to come from him. So, v'kamar, kulan kurian beso. So then we say, yes, but at the end of the day, they're all called his house, and it says, beso, and therefore it includes them, even though they aren't investing money in it. Bishlam of the Reb Shimon, I understand according to Reb Shimon, who says that who says that so Bishlam of the Reb Shimon, right, who says that they don't get kapara from the Sar Mishtalech. So Hanu Dichsiv Trevi doing Vidam Apar. That by the Parshal Aharon there are two viduis, and then there's the blood of the par. Chad keneged tsar hanais b'fnim, v'chad keneged tsar hanais b'chutz, v'chad keneged tsar mishtalech. Right? That when it comes to the par of Aharon, so there's two viduis and one throwing of the blood. One, right? So three things. One is keneged the tsar hanais b'fnim by the Israels. One is keneged the tsar hanais b'chutz by the Israels, both for Tumas Mikdash v'Kodashim, and the third for the Sar HaMishtalech by the Israels. And for Kohanim, they have two vidois and one throwing of the blood, and that is going to be to cover kind of all the bases for the Tumas Mikdash v'Kodashim and Shar Averes. El Rabbi Yehuda trei viduin v'dam apar lamali. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, why do you need two vidois and the blood? After all, they're included with the according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Kohanim are included by Shar Averes with the Sar HaMishtalech, and therefore they only need Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashav, which would be Keneged the Sarah Naisa B'Fnim and Sarah Naisa B'Chutz. So all you should need is two. Right? So Lamli B'Chad Vidoy V'Dam Osagir. One Vidoy and the blood should be enough. Echad Lo. So Echad Lo V'Echad Lebeso. So the Gemara answers why you would need, why nonetheless there are two Vidoys and the blood, because the two Vidoys is one for himself. The Kohen Gadol first does Vidoy for himself before then going to be Mechaper for everybody else. Because the Tanis we learn in a Brisa, Ketana Dever Bishmal, Kach Hi Midas Adin Oheges. This is how it makes more sense. Mutav Yavo Zakai Vichaper Alachayev. It makes more sense that the Kohen Gadol should first do a vidoy for himself and get atonement for himself before he now represents the rest of the Kohanim and the rest of his household in their confession, right? As opposed to somebody who's coming and he himself is guilty and he's trying to now, not just atone for himself but for everybody. Let him first atone for himself and then come as an innocent person representing guilty people and get them their atonement as an innocent person. That's where there are two vidoys, one for himself and then for the rest of his household, /the Kohanim, Hadron Olach, Shevuos Shtaim. We will come back to Shevuos Shtaim. Okay, I think ended up being a long daf. I think maybe more than an hour, but it was I don't think it was a particularly difficult daf, and it was an interesting daf where we talked about what Yom Kippur is mechaper for. Do you have to do tshuva? Do you not have to do tshuva? Different machlokes there. Also, what if a person is like mamish mechal Yom Kippur? Can Yom Kippur be mechaper for being mechal Yom Kippur itself? That was interesting. And then we got into the Parsha Haran, which is actually Taka this week's Parsha, at least here in Eretz Yisrael. It's interesting how the Gemaras have been aligning. The Gemaras in Shevuos. It's interesting. A lot of things are aligning. The Gemara in Shevuos, right, with Negayim and stuff was last week, at least for me, with Tarzuyim and Tzorah. Now we're talking about Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashav and Yom Kippur, which is this week, Achrei Mos Kedoshim. And just generally, it's called Shevuos. We're in Shviras HaOmer. This is 49 pages. People learn it dafka during Shviras HaOmer. It's very interesting. Peace out.